Hi guys, this is Nadia from Imbali Crafts, and today I want to show you how to create this wire wrapped hammered pendant. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button because I upload new stuff on a regular basis. I quite often make PDF tutorials. I have full kits with all the gemstones and wire, and I have all sorts of nice goodies on my site. So I will pop a link below and you can take a gander over to my shop and see if there's anything you fancy. Last but not least, why not come and join us in our artist group on Facebook if you'd like a bit of support if you're new or you just want to join a fun group. Again, I will pop a link below, and you're very welcome to join us, and I would love to have you. Right, let's get started. So to begin with, we're taking our base wire, which needs to be quite thick because obviously that's the structure. So this is 1.6, which is, I believe, your 14 gauge wire. And I've taken it and folded it in half, and then I'm going to choose my stone, which, by the way, you can get in my shop by itself or in the kit. And we're going to make it fit the frame, or make the frame fit it rather. So what I'm doing here is I'm shaping the initial frame by hand, and I'm just placing the stone that I've picked and make sure that there's a little bit of a gap in between the frame and the stone, roughly about 1 millimeter or so. And this is so that we have enough space to attach wires and wrap around it later. Otherwise there would be no room to attach wires to. So I'm shaping it here until it roughly fits the stone, leaving a bit of a gap at the top. So once I'm happy, I need to line up, and the crossing of the wire needs to be right above the tip, the point, so that everything is symmetrical and straight. You can manipulate the wires later on. Even if the first bend isn't right, you can unbend it, and straighten it out a bit. It takes a bit of time and sort of adjusting until you're satisfied and everything is symmetrical. So next I'm going to hammer. So the important bit here is to put your fingers over the two wires where the bail is going to be, and then hammer the tip. You have to do this really gently, because obviously if you hammer too hard, you put dents in your wire, and it'll look uneven. And you can see me here also putting my thumb over the two wires at the top, and this is so that the wire doesn't distort when you're hammering, because it will move out of position, and it'll become uneven. So I just keep my thumb over the two bail wires to keep it together, and this is just to strengthen it. So that's what it looks like. So next is we're going to create the bail. Now for this I've used my 0.8 20 gauge half round wire. You can use round wire as well if you wanted to. 0.6 I would use for that, which is your 22 gauge if you don't have half round. And all I'm doing here is I've anchored the half round to one of the sides, and then I am wrapping it around the bail. Now obviously you can make this longer or shorter, so just continue until you have enough of a length. So this was about 45 centimeters, and that's a nice long bail. So the next step is to bend the bail forward a little bit. This is so that when I create the loop, it's central over the pendant itself and not at the back or at the front, so that everything hangs and doesn't is not lopsided, or hangs from the front, if that makes sense. Sometimes I don't talk sense. So just keep bending it until I'm happy. So just be careful that you don't move the half round wire and there's no gaps in between. And then I'm bending the legs up ever so slightly so that when I fold the shape over, they kind of line up parallel with the frame itself. As you can see, I'm just adjusting a little bit, and then I'm pressing and closing off. And that's what it looks like. So next I'm going to excuse me I'm going to create the swirls. So this is organic, which means that it's not symmetrical. You could make it symmetrical, but I decided for this pendant that I'm just going to go asymmetrical. If you have longer wires, you can obviously create more detail with that. I just use the shorter sections. So this is what I've got to work with. So I'm creating a swirl, and next I'm going to shape the end. So I'm just using my pliers here to very gently shape the wire into the direction that I want it to. You don't actually have to use a round tool. If you want, you can just very gently manipulate the wire with your chain nose pliers. I find it gives me better control. Right, so I've done the one side, so this is what it looks like. So I'm going to do the same to the other. So again, I'm creating a swirl. Now this is a clockwise swirl, whereas the other one was an anti-clockwise swirl. So just take your time and shape it nicely, and use your pliers now once you come back to create the swirl again on the other side. So I'm doing the same as I did in the beginning with the other swirl. So I'm just shaping it with my pliers, and I take my time. And because it's a heavier gauge, it's a little bit more difficult to manipulate, but it's not too hard. So it's still easy to shape and create. That's what it looks like. And then obviously just arrange it until you're satisfied with the look. I quite often create and then I adjust as I go along, little adjustments here and there, tweaks, until I'm happy with how it looks. So whatever you do first is not set in stone. You can change and add it later. So next I want to create a nice tapered swirl, and the way I do this is I take my round nose pliers, and you can see me here squeezing the tip as I sort of rotate the pliers. And what this does, one of my favorite techniques, because it really creates a beautiful taper to the end of the wire. And in the beginning, when I first started wrapping, I used to file the wire, which takes a bit of time. This is a much quicker technique and it looks just as good. So now I'm satisfied with the shape itself, and the next step obviously is to make sure the stone fits and you're happy with the shape and all. And we're going to then bend the wires upwards because I'm going to hammer the shapes. So we need to obviously get the flare that gives you that nice sort of sparkly look. So what I'm doing here is I've opened up the wires and I make sure that I hammer these wires from the inside, meaning that when you use a hammer like this, even if it's a domed hammer like I have here, you will get little dents and marks on the wire. So the way I start the taper is I use the small dome of my domed hammer to create the flare on the inside. And the important part here is to use very gentle taps. If you hammer too hard with too heavy blows, this will kind of dent and distort the wire. So just be patient, the wire will eventually expand. And another important tip is to hammer. So just imagine the wire kind of expands, like a bit like dough that you're rolling. So hammer in the direction you want the wire to expand. So that's what it looks like. So I'm happy with the shape, and I'm now bending the wires back in place. Obviously you can hammer as much as you want, and make it as wide as you want. Just bear in mind the wire will thin out, so it'll become weaker, which is not too bad for this design, but for some instances it's important that it's not too weak. So this is what it looks like. I'm quite happy with the shape, so let's move on to the next step. So next I'm cutting a piece of 1mm 18 gauge wire, and I'm using this as the crossing. So this is like my cross members at the back. So I'm attaching the first piece sort of in the middle, and I'm going to give it 2 or 3 wraps around the frame. And I usually go with 2 for simple ones, and 3 if I want it to be really tight, because otherwise it kind of moves. So I'm just squeezing this down like so, and I've attached my other wire as well. You can see here there's one attachment on each side. This will hold my stone. So I'm just placing it on top, and make sure that the tip and the top of the stone is held in place. Now obviously this will not hold the stone in place yet, it'll be loose for quite some time. So I'm going to use the bottom right half round wire first to create my first detail, and I'm kind of swirling it on the right hand side, and then I'm going to create my first decorative swirl at the top, and this is going anti-clockwise. So I create a swirl, and then I'm going in through the frame and bring it back out towards the back. You can see here, you keep your finger over the stone initially to make sure that the swirl sits where you want it to sit. And I very gently rotate my wires, bend the wires out again as I rotate so that I have space to work. And then just keep going until you're satisfied with where the swirl sits. As I said earlier, you initially create a shape, and when you're roughly happy with where the swirl is sitting, you can then attach to the frame and then later manipulate the shape until you're happy. So you can see me here arranging, and I take my time, and this is just how it works. And obviously the stone will not stay in place, so this is just what the first one looks like. So next I'm bringing the swirl, when I'm happy with the shape, I'm bringing the swirl back out because I'd like the section to be flared. So try not to distort it when you pull it back out. You can still, even after it's been hammered, you can shape it. Obviously limited ability to shape it when it's hammered, but you still can. So I'm hammering and flaring it again. And once I've done that, this is what it looks like, and I'll bring it back in position, and then it's time to attach it to the frame. So at the back, I make sure I keep my fingers over the wires at the front so they don't distort while I attach. I bring my pliers in and I manipulate and pull until I'm satisfied with the look. And all the while, as I said, make sure your fingers are over the wire. So that's what it looks like. Again, the stone will not held in place for quite some time to come. This is just details. So that's what it looks like. And next we're going to do the same with the bottom left wire. So this time we're going in a anti-clockwise direction, and we are bringing it back in on itself just to create a little swirl on the bottom left to help keep the stone in place. And once again, you see me use my chain nose pliers to manipulate the wire. Try not to mark the wire, so when you're doing this, try and hold the wire gently. The less marks you get on your wire, the less you have to polish it later on. So just be gentle and take your time. The most important thing is with these designs is take your time and don't panic, don't rush, which is what I used to do in the beginning when I tried something new and it was something I found difficult. Just take your time. It makes a lot of things much easier. So this is what the initial swirl looks like, and then once you're happy with that, you can kind of manipulate the shape and the look of it, and then attach it to your frame. So you can see I'm arranging and adjusting continuously until I'm sort of happy. Put the stone back in to see if it fits and if I like it, and when I'm satisfied, I'm going to attach it to the frame. So I've attached it, and I am now tweaking the swirl, because every little section you attach here will help to keep the stone in place, and obviously you want the shape to be right. And then I'm going to, I haven't attached it yet, I will do this now. So once you're happy, you do exactly the same thing. So you pick the place. So you imagine when you're attaching your wires where you want to place your next detail. So you're attaching it wherever you like, so that you have the wire available. So now it's attached, and I quite like the look of it. So now I'm going to bring in this wire, and I'm going to create a detail on the left hand side again. Still the stone is loose, so you need to kind of keep it in place and attach or move the next wire in place so that you can then create the next swirl. I'm not sure if I talked much sense here, but you probably get the picture. So I brought the wire back in towards the sort of center of the swirl, because I'm going to create my next detail in the middle here to go over the stone. You can see the stone is still loose, obviously. So next I'm going to use this wire I've brought in just now, and I'm going to shape it and bring it in over the stone towards the middle. Now sometimes when you have wires, you know, in confined spaces like this, you need to start your swirl with a tool. And here I'm using my round nose pliers to create a gentle curve first, because I can't really use my fingers. I can't get in close enough to create a swirl. So you use your tools to do that. And then once you have a starting point, you can then manipulate the wire a bit easier to create a swirl. So you just kind of learn with the tools, and you know, once you've done this a couple of times, you kind of get used to the process. So I'm using my round nose pliers and I'm rotating it until I'm happy with the initial shape. This is kind of what it looks like, so I'm okay with the way it looks. So you just adjust your stone and manipulate the wire roughly until you're satisfied with where it sits. So next I want to create the first swirl that will actively help to keep the stone in place. So I'm going to take the wire, leftover wire, and I'm rotating it back in on itself in a clockwise motion, and I will fold it over the stone and bring it back out and then attach it to one of the cross members. So this is a bit fiddly at this stage, so just take your time, obviously, because the stone is still quite loose. So I'm using my round nose pliers to very gently, I take my time with this, roll the wire in on itself basically. And I'm going to pull it through, and be sure not to pull too much, otherwise you're going to make it disappear to the back of the stone, and that's not what you want. So you kind of rotate, jiggle and wiggle until you're happy with the actual shape. And I'm showing this whole process just to show you that there's quite a bit of manipulation to it, and it doesn't actually look perfect to begin with, which is totally fine. Just the initial shape needs to be alright, and once you've attached it to the wire and there's a little bit of a structure to it, you can then manipulate the shape of it. So that's what it looks like initially. So I'm happy with that. So I am now going to attach this wire to the frame. So I've tightened it up and I've created the shape, and now all I'm doing is, again, I'm rolling it back in on itself, and I am feeding it around one of the cross members at the top. And the closer the attachment point is to the wire itself, the more structure there is to it. I hope that makes sense. The further away you attach a wire from the point of contact to the stone, the more loose it will be, if that makes sense. I hope I explained this right. So that's what it looks like. So next we're going to take that wire that we've just attached, and I'm going to bring it down to the bottom of the frame, and I'm going to attach it to the bottom cross member. This is so that there is more of a structure and stability, because that will create another cross member which will link the bottom and the top cross member, and therefore tighten everything up. So you can just see me here manipulating the wire with my pliers. And that's what it looks like. So quite happy with the initial shape. And what we're going to do now is create another swirl. We're going to move over to the right hand side. So I'm bringing one of the wires in towards the center, because I'm going to use this to create another structural swirl which will help keep the stone in place, as well as a decorative one. So all these swirls, top and bottom combined, will create a nice structure to keep everything sitting tight. So once again, you see me here manipulating it, and I'm going to pull it through with my wires. And it's very important when you do this sort of thing that you do it gently and slowly, because you'll find that you'll have much more control, you know, and just pause in between and do it slowly, because it'll be much easier to do. That's what it looks like. And I'm just taking my time and rotating the wires as I go, sitting on top of the stone. And once I'm happy, attach it to the frame. So that's what it looks like so far. And next, obviously, I'm going to attach this wire to the cross member at the top on the other side, because that will give you a nice tight fit, and it will make sure that the stone is caged in and it won't shift. So attached, I'm moving down, doing the same thing with this wire, and I'm going to the side of the frame to give it a little bit more structure and attach it to the frame itself on the side. So that's what it looks like. You can see top, left and middle all attached to the frame. So next I'm going to create a detail at the top. So top left wire, I'm folding over the pendant itself, and I'm creating sort of a anti-clockwise swirl, which I will then lay over the bail like so. So I'm quite happy with the shape, but I would like this to be flared. So once I'm happy with the initial shape, I'm bending it back out again, and remember to hammer everything from the inside. So I'm opening this up, and I am using the domed side, big dome, to hammer this. And again, remember to be very gentle, as that will create a much nicer hammered area. So now I'm satisfied. I am going to bring the wire through the bail from the left hand side out to the other side, and I'm going to give this 2 wraps to tighten it up. Keep your thumb over the wire itself to make sure it doesn't actually shift, and attach it until you're happy with how it looks. So 2 wraps. So I've attached it, and now I am going to do exactly the same with the other side. So I'm shaping it in a clockwise kind of swirl, and then I'm attaching it to the frame like I did with the wire on the left. So nice swirl. You can hammer this one as well, and I'm just going to hammer it and then attach it, bringing it from the right. So I've hammered it, and now I'm going to attach it to the frame. So this time I'm coming in from the right through to frame, and I'm going to attach it with 2 wraps. And you can see here that I have actually brought the one wire on the left over through the top, and then brought it back out to the back. I don't know what happened to that clip where I was doing this, but I've lost it. But I'm pausing the video here so you can see what I've done. So I've brought in the left wire, and I haven't done the right wire yet, which I will do in a minute. And first I am hammering it here, and you will see that you're able to manipulate hammered wire quite nicely after that. So this is now hammered flat, and you can see it's still quite malleable. So I am folding it forward. Obviously be careful not to mar the wire too much. So I'm shaping it, and like I did with the left wire where I didn't have the clip for, I'm folding it through the frame, and then I'm shaping it, and I'm going to bring it out towards the back, and then attach the wires on the left and on the right to the frame just underneath the bail. So that's what I've done here, and you can see I've done about 3 wraps on each side to make sure they're nice and tight, and we're not going to need those wires anymore. So I'm going to trim these off. Same thing on the other side, and make sure you trim the wires off where they can't snag on clothing. That's what it looks like. So next I'm going to create the prong setting for the stone. Now obviously normally for the size stone you would need to use thicker wires to hold it in place, but there isn't much space where I wanted to put the stone, so I have used 0.6 which is your 22 gauge, just to make you know, the sort of setting a little bit slimmer so they can fit in a space, I've just used more prongs to attach to you know, to catch the stone actually. So I'm just popping it in. I'm going to pop it under the wires, and then what I'm going to do is attach the legs from the setting to the frame itself. So I've done that now, and then again we're going to remove the wires because we don't need them anymore. If you wanted to, I always have a tendency to reuse wires like that. I hate cutting anything off. So I usually just try and reuse, but there's a limit to what you can do, so I'm just going to cut these off now. And last but not least, we're just going to use some 0.4, which is your 26 gauge wire, and attach the beads to the design. Obviously, if you want to oxidize your pendant, you must do this before, because those beads are harder to polish. And that's it. So that's the whole pendant done. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. I would absolutely love it if you would come and visit me on any of my social media pages. I've got Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And obviously don't forget about our artist group if you'd like to join a fabulous community, wire wrappers and metalsmiths worldwide. I'll pop the link in the description. And as I mentioned earlier, obviously, if you're interested in the full kit to buy loose gemstones, wire, other PDF tutorials, visit my site and see if there's anything you fancy. And that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.